Vrahode is a brand new world without humans, elves, dwarves, demons, or the undead, or anything you've come to expect of a fantasy world.
Just page 2, man. Just page 2.
Okay, how lovely. How lovely is that? Thank you for listening. Okay, there we go. I got it.
Episode's over.
My name is Jeff Irving, and this is the Exploring Vrahode podcast. I am the creator of the Vrahode game system. And in this podcast, we're going to do a deep dive into the lore and gameplay of Vrahode. I'm joined by Brandon Rollins, who will be acting as a stand-in for you, asking many of the questions you might be curious about yourself. Brandon, what is it we're going to be talking about today?
So last episode, we had talked about the playable races of Vrahode, but what we didn't actually have time to cover was some of the other ones that are there as well. The friendly and, well, if not friendly, neutral NPCs of the world. And so there are 5 of them actually on the website that we have at least public knowledge of right now. And I wanted to just talk to you about them and figure out what their deals are, what's life like for them. So, and this is going to be another episode where I just kind of pronounce things however I want to, and we're just going to see what happens. I'm leaving it in. I want that kind of authentic feel.
Yeah.
Like we're all, that's kind of the point of having me here, is I want to be the person just stumbling across this like a complete movie. So the first one that you've got on here is a man made of rocks and named Chorn.
Yeah, the Chorn. Okay. You did great, by the way. That was spot on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It gets harder from here.
I will take the victories where I can.
It gets harder from here. So, but the Chorn, the Chorn, the Athak-uul, when the Athak-uul came to Vrahode and crafted the 10 crafted races, the Chorn was, they said, hey, let's make a race that is from the stratus and the rocks of Vrahode. And so they brought the Chorn into being from that. And so, yes, they're essentially, the Chorn are nothing more than a soul with the power to combine rocks and hold them in a physical form, to interact within the world of Vrahode. So they're just nothing more than that. So it's the soul. It's essentially the soul of the Chorn that is what is viable and what you're interacting with. A Chorn could let loose of all the rocks that form it. It could go into the ground. It could travel a long distance and come up with different rocks. But it's ultimately that soul that combines those rocks and brings them together with the power of that soul to have them create a form and interact with the world.
Do the playable characters kind of just see these guys around whenever they're walking and traveling around Vrahode?
Well, obviously, the Athak-uul intentionally crafted these races from disparate and distant parts of the world, because they feared the idea that someday those races might come together and unify against them. And so they went out and they went to these far-flung parts of the world to try to craft these congregations of worshipers, if you will. And the Chorn were crafted on the mountain of Rockroot. And they were designed to stay there and be worshipers from that vantage point. So no, they don't interact with the other races. None of the races interact much. This is very much Greenwood tale. It's not like we had these huge elaborate cities and these cultures and roads, and there's none of that on Vrahode. Vrahode is a very primitive world.
At least it is right now. I suppose in the story, inevitably, these guys are going to end up interacting over time.
Yes, absolutely. And what we find ourselves in is kind of a revival, is that a lot of things have been lost. And that, even metallurgy, even the idea that we can craft metal weapons and metal implements has been lost. And as we enter into this timeline of the story of Vrahode, the Calteeryn Ascension, what we're looking at is a revival and this prophesied individual that will bring about Vrahode's ability to protect itself from forces without. So yeah, definitely. And the Torrn play a very important role in that.
Yeah, what kind of role do they play? Or is that getting into spoiler territory?
Well, let me just introduce you to a new word. It's called a balacombe. A balacombe is a history stone. And as the Torrn walk around the world of Vrahode and interact and take part in events, current events, there are times when a Torrn might find itself in need of protecting a certain amount of information or data or whatever about the world. And what it does in order to do that is it stops living among the denizens of that day, and it just forms a balacombe, which is a history stone. So it goes down into this little stone, and it says, hey, I've decided that this information that I hold is more important than my life. And so then what we have is later in timelines, we have people discovering these balacombe and saying, what truths do you have for us from past ages? And only the Torrn provide that information from us because they've sacrificed their own lives to protect that information.
That's cool because that kind of makes them function like a library before even printing presses exist, as repositories of this ancient knowledge.
Absolutely.
And because we know already that the Aquarius are ancient and are these very dark beings, to very briefly to understate it, really.
Yeah.
I can imagine that when these balacombs are found, a lot of cursed knowledge is going to come up as well. Things that people really wish they didn't know.
You're right. And what it does is it changes the whole kind of the whole kind of the thrust of the narrative and the story arc of our game series. We've got 4 games to navigate through. And when information is found out from these balacombe, what it does is it uncovers truths that were never known. And now it informs our heroes as to, now what? We know this is not what we've been told. It's something different. So how do we deal with that? And so then we have to go and rely on Sean Allen Dressler, our writer, our epic campaign writer, and say, okay, where are you taking us? What is this knowledge going to do for us in our quests?
Yeah, and I'm going to have to get him on the show pretty soon because
I hope so.
There's so many questions we can ask him. Yeah. Like when we get in the quest books, we really got to have him on, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's so much groundwork I want to lay before I even rope him in, but I really want to hear his input on this, especially when we start talking gameplay.
Yep.
So I guess moving on a little bit, you've also got the Greenling, which kind of look like these fairy-like creatures. Oh,
are you talking about the Greenling?
I'm talking about the Greenling.
Okay. Well, the Greenling, another amazing race. Keep in mind that we've got 6 playable races, 4 non-playable races. The reason we chose the 6 playable races and that we relegated the 4 friendly races, kind of crafted races, to non-playable is because we felt like we needed to keep the power structure, the ability to engage in combat effectively was powerful enough, but not too powerful. So where we find the Torrn kind of being this almost impenetrable warrior of stone, we find the Greenling being this kind of very delicate, very independently not powerful race, right? We've got these little bitty kind of sprite-like beings that are maybe a foot tall, 1.5 feet tall, but together in a hive, they are, quite frankly, the most powerful race on all of Vrahode. But it's very, very difficult in order to bring that power to bear. And it's through that hive-like kind of collective behavior that when applied to the playable races, especially Calteeryn, this prophesied character that's been, prophesied to come to Vrahode and save us all from whatever threats lie without. The Greenling might be the key to that. They have this ability called United We Stand. And this ability allows a caster to have +1 to their mind rolls and their mind skill abilities or their spells for every individual in the party. And so what they do is they draw from the power of all the supportive heroes around them. And so their spells, their rule, their magic is almost guaranteed to have maximum effect. But could a greenling do that on their own? Well, they could with their hive, but they're typically fairly weak individually, right?
So their power really comes from. Well, is it fair to call them a hive mind?
I think it is. I think it is.
Okay.
And they're very female dominated. The males in their society are treated like crap. I mean, it's like a praying mantis, the female praying mantis bites the head off the male when they're done mating, right? Mm-hmm. It's not quite that severe, but it's darn close. You got
to deal with the matriarchy. That's what you're saying.
This is a very, very strong matriarchy. They live well above the ground in these hives, and yes, they're very, very insect-minded.
That's really interesting. So, man, I just I'm trying to think about what kind of questions to ask. So they, of course, I assume they're yet another race that kind of lives in isolation from the others. Like, where do they live exactly?
Well, I mean, I think you can expect the greenling to be in forests, right? Okay. You can expect their villages to be well above the ground for the protection of the fact that they're not really robust against maybe a lot of the land creatures. So you're going to find them high in the forest, and their villages are going to be designed around trees and vines and things. So they're also, they just don't have, they're so diminutive, they're so small that a lot of the damage that they do, a lot of the things that they do to help you are just like a death of 1,000 cuts. They have the ability to use poison and infectious wounds, and they can also control vines, small plants and vines, to slow enemies in battle. But that's pretty much it. I mean, they're just, but the one ability they have, United We Stand, which, I mean, it's a little bit of a kind of a tongue-in-cheek reference, but the ability for a caster in the mind ability, which the mind ability is mostly about direct damage, to be able to draw power from the rest of your party by learning the greenling magic is invaluable to the story arc. It's invaluable.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's just strange to think about creatures with such a powerful natural ability having just natural predators out there that they have to basically live high in the trees to be away from.
Yep.
So you've also got the Sarun, and they're another reptilian race. And by the looks of it from this photo, it looks like, well, you've got this guy, he's a captain of a ship steering the thing in the storm. So I'm guessing they are seafaring lizards in essence.
Yeah. The Saharun the inspiration for the Saharun came from the iguana of the Galapagos Islands. Quite frankly, I've always been enamored by them, the variety of the skin tones, and just this amazing lizard that can go underwater and do things and then has to come up and navigate this hostile, hot, rocky environment. Mm-hmm. And so the cousins, the Saharun, yes, they're seafarers, and Captain Tentori is the captain of the Lady Virtue, which is our ship in the game that takes our heroes around the map at a cost. But one of the neat things about our game, and I'll do this briefly because I don't want to take too much of an aside, is we have a lot of modes in the game. We have a lot of ways that the game changes as you play it. And one of those ways is ocean exploration. And so when you're at sea, you have this beautiful ship and this crew and this captain at your service that are taking you from landmass to landmass so that you can enjoy your quests. But obviously, they want you to pay them for their services, but they'll also stand in and help protect you in case of threats to the ship.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this was actually something that helps out players when they're playing. Like if you've got a 2-person team, they can actually fill in some of those other character slots, perhaps 4, so that you have a full party of 6.
Yeah, if you're solo playing, Well, 5 of Captain Centauri's crew will stand in with you and defeat whatever threat faces the ship. If you have 4 heroes in your group, well, then they'll spring for 2 of them. 2 of the crew will stand in, but they expect you. The bigger your group, they expect you to do more and protect the ship so that they may take you and carry you to where you hope to go.
Basically, they don't want dead weight on the ship.
They will not accept dead weight. First, you have to pay for passage, and then you have to lift your weight to protect the ship. Yes.
Will they make you walk the plank if you don't haul your weight?
You know what? I honestly think there should be a card that comes up in some deck, like Ocean Exploration, like, guess what? You haven't done anything. Goodbye. Walk the plank. I love it. I love it.
Hey, it's not too late. It's not too late.
I know it. I mean,
you can say we added this after popular playtesting or something.
Yeah. By popular demand, guess what? You're screwed.
Yep. So the next one you've got are the Vrahode, who...
Oh.
Yeah, so they've got some history, I understand.
Yes. The Vrahode, the interesting thing about the Vrahode is they're not one of the 10 crafted races. These people existed long before the Athak-uul ever came to Vrahode. And so they have a very unique magic. And their magic, unfortunately, the race was decimated, almost like a genocide when the Athak-uul came to Vrahode. They decimated them. They killed up, wherever they found them, they killed them. And they forced them underground. And so you have this wonderful race of people that are not violent, and they have this lovely, subtle type of magic in that they take the bones of their ancestors, of the people they respect most. They take little pieces of these bones and they craft bone glyphs from them, which it enchants this little piece of bone that you then break over an item, a weapon, armor, a helmet, a shield, and it enhances the magic of their ancestors, actually enhances your items and your gear as you travel through the story arc. So this is a race that you want to interact with. This is a race you want to impress. This is a race that you want to bring them whatever they desire. And one of the things they're rediscovering in the world of Vrahode after being forced underground after the genocide is metallurgy, right?
So and that's a big deal considering that metallurgy doesn't exist at the beginning of the story.
No.
I have a feeling these guys, they know stuff. They have culture that lets them know about all the awful things that happened.
Yes.
Because of the Athak-uul.
Absolutely. And guess what? Remember the ball of comb we talked about earlier? Yeah. Guess where the ball of comb is protected? It's protected in the Vrahode library.
That makes sense.
Yes, they're like, hey, we got screwed over by these Athak-uul guys that came in and kicked our butts. And we want to do everything we can to recapture our glory. And the only way we're going to do it is with some group that can defeat them. And so we're going to give them whatever we can do to do that and fuel them. So yes, you should treat the Vrahode with almost like the priest at church. You give them reverence.
I assume that they're also just really cagey and hard to impress simply because they've had so much tragedy in their history as well.
They are. They're a bit jaded. But I will say this. The things that impress the Vrahode most are the things that they can't themselves reach out and get. And what that ends up being, they have certain ores that they can find in the underland that they have access to. But there's certain ores, there's a dark metallic ore and there's a shiny ore that are only found in the overlands. And if you get those, you collect those in your travels, your adventures, and you bring them to them, they will actually craft special items for you using recipes that are only fulfilled through you bringing them the specific ore that they need to make that item for you.
Mm-hmm. And that's like the only way you can take advantage of that ancient knowledge is you have to source these really difficult materials.
Yes, that's the only way. Now, I'm not going to say that the recipes are complex or they're super, super difficult to gather. They're not, because that's not what this game is about. This game series is not about that. It's about, it's more about, it's being social and ease of play and streamlining and things like that. So we give you some recipes but you can do these. They're not super hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and now there's just one more on here that I wanted to ask about, and that is the Quayon.
Uh-huh.
So, I don't think we've talked about these guys at all. What is their role within the world of Vrahode?
Well, the Quayon are the Akurish. They're us, but
Wait,
they're much more pragmatic. They're smarter, and they came to Vrahode just like the Akurish to conquer. And their goal was to take over this world and make it a slave to their will. But when they came here, what they recognized was that there was a knowledge, a godlike presence, a something worthy of worship to them. And so they decided to stay on in Vrahode as chroniclers, as a race of people that would just sit back and chronicle history and the unfolding of events as new conquerors came, so that they could further understand the true creator of Vrahode.
so it sounds like you said that they are a Korish. Or by that do you mean that they kind of like they share a common ancestor?
You
And
mean the
because
Quayon?
yeah,
Oh no, the
okay,
Quayon and
no,
the Akurish do not share any genetics. They're from a completely different place.
okay,
Yep,
so they I no, hold on. I guess you must have said that they are basically they attempted initially to conquer Vrahode
yes,
like the Akurish.
yes.
And I guess these guys did they just realize the error of their ways? Did they
That's
have a
exactly
moral reckoning?
That's it. They came and they're like, "Hey, we're going to take over this planet and we're going to rule its magic and we're doing this." But they got here and they went, "Uh-oh. Hey, there's something much deeper than this." And just their wisdom to be able to see that, hey, there's a shapeless here. What is a shapeless thing? Well, the shapeless is essentially all the proof we need to know that there's a greater creator. And so they set out to understand that greater creator, the true creator of Vrahode.
Beyond just the Akorish.
Right, because they know that the Akurish, that all they're doing is folly. They know that they're going to fail. They know it.
Yeah. These guys, I feel like they are kind of like the Barajadim in the sense that they're ancient. They go back a really, 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 really long
The
way.
difference between the Barajadim and the Quayon is this. The Barajadim have experienced a genocide. The Quayon's magic is so powerful, and it's basically telekinetic. They have the ability to move extremely fast, to elevate things, and to be anywhere in the world they wish to be. But they don't want to affect history. They want to be outside of history. They just want to chronicle it because they respect the world and the true creator so much. The Barajadim are of Vrahode. They're not one of the crafted races of the Akurish. They're from the true creator. And so they were wiped out and they have a vendetta. They want to help the heroes in any way they can, because if they can do that, there may be redemption for their race in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And they can actually reclaim that place that they have as a native. They're natives. It's like the American Indians. The Barajadim just want to be part of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Come out from underground and like actually live.
Yes. Oh no,
They're
they're just forced into whatever crevice they could hide in.
Yeah, and that creates. Yeah, I mean that's awful. Creates such an arc, such an interesting arc for them because they just have all this knowledge, but of course they can't come out and share it with the others either.
Yep. Well,
I bet that means people have to seek them out too. Like the playables have to probably go on quests to actually find them and seek out their advice.
Yeah. Well, that's it. They're underground now. There is no way to experience and to get advancement in your gear without them. And the only way to get that is to go underground, because that's where they've been forced from the Akurish. And so, yes, as you play through the core box and you kind of go through those overland flats and you fight through the marshes and you fight through the forests and you fight through the deserts. When you start going into the caverns and you start going into those basic dungeons, there are real opportunities for you to connect with the Barajadim. Now, will they have high expectations of you? Absolutely. You have to bring them these ores that they need. But in so doing, you build that loyalty up with them, they're going to be the best ally you have in the story arc to actually defeat the Akourish. They're going to be.
Yeah, so getting them on your side is going to be absolutely critical for any
Yes.
player, no matter what hero they're using.
Well, and not only, there's two ways to do it with the Barjadim. You have the Bone Glyph Merchant, which is typically a female. The females tend to be the Bone Glyph Merchants. They're the ones that are going to give you these bone glyphs that let you break it over your gear to improve it. Then you have the males that tend to be more of the blacksmith type. And they're the ones that are going to forge the fancy armor and make you the fancy sword and give you the fancy spear by virtue of you bringing them or from the overland that they can no longer have access to.
Mm-hmm.
And in so doing, then they make you powerful. They support you. They love you. They want you to do the best you can to try to beat the Akourish.
I wonder, like, before all the playable races start interacting throughout the course of the story, do the Barad-shadim have allies that go on the surface and look for things on their behalf? Or is that something new for them, a new opportunity?
Say that again. I lost you for a second. Say that again.
Well, I was just thinking, so the Barad-shadim, before the events of the game,
yes,
do they have allies on the surface that seek out materials for them?
The only ally they have is the ally that's well suited to interacting with them both on the surface and underground, which is where their new home is, and that's the Chorn.
That makes sense. So it all comes full circle.
Yes. And they have agreed to take the Barad-shadim, which is, I can tell you the guy's name. I can actually tell you the name of the Barad-shadim. There is a, let's see, I could find the list. Anyway, there is Grolden, that's it. Grolden is the Barad-shadim, is the Chorn that chose to become a Balacombe, and he was taken as a Balacombe into an underground repository of Barad-shadim literature and stored there in their library and protected in hopes that someday the Calteeryn prophecy would be fulfilled. So the cool thing about the Calteeryn prophecy is the Calteeryn prophecy is not an Akourish prophecy. They hijacked it. The truth of the Calteeryn prophecy rests with the Chorn, because the Chorn that chose to be Grolden, who chose to be a Balacombe, was one of the first Chorn that came through the veil when the Akourish created the Chorn.
And this is where you and I as the players come in, basically, is you get to become the Calteeryn over time. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the whole core box is about whoever is chosen amongst your group, and it's random. It could be any of you. It's like, which one of you will be the Calteeryn? Well, guess what? It's the Athak-uul character. What? Really? This ugly little creature is the chosen one? And it's everyone else's job to protect them, because the more powerful they become, the more of a target they become in this game. And all you're trying to do is to help them fulfill the prophecy and become Calteeryn.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that all fits in.
Yes.
I think this is actually a good place to stop for now, because I actually was thinking for the next one, what we can do is start talking about the pre-generated heroes and roles.
Okay.
And for people who haven't done a little bit of reading on this yet, and I've only done a little, is basically in Vrahode, instead of having to develop your characters from scratch every time before you start, you can actually pick up and play with ones that have already been made, in addition to creating your own. So
yeah, we have a way for you. We have a pad of paper that's called a hero progression sheet, and it allows you to write down what your hero has and lay out your cards, take a shot with your cell phone, because everyone's got it, and then just pick right back up where you left off as you progress.
Yep, that's right. And I think that's actually, because now we have all the history now, it would be a very good thing to pick up there with the next one.
Okay. Thank you for listening to the Exploring Vrahode podcast. If you enjoyed this show, take a moment and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It helps more than you know. You can learn more about Vrahode on vrahode.com. That's VRAHODE.com. Link in the show notes. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where we're at Vrahode. Thank you again for listening. We really appreciate it. Keep an eye out for our next episode in 2 weeks.